Before we begin, hear this carefully. This is not a message about fear. It is a message about wisdom. It is not about running from people. It is about learning how to recognize the people who slowly steal your peace while pretending to protect it. There is a story in the Bible that many people read but very few truly understand. It is the story of a man who appeared trustworthy on the outside, yet carried destruction in his heart. The frightening part is that nobody saw the danger at first. Not because the signs were hidden, but because the signs looked ordinary. And that is exactly how many of life's greatest dangers appear. They do not arrive wearing a warning label. They arrive wearing a smile. Tonight, I want you to stay until the end because what you are about to hear may completely change the way you look at certain people around you. The name that will shock you is not the name of a stranger. It is the name of a type of person. A personality. A spirit. A pattern. And when you recognize it, everything starts making sense. Have you ever noticed how some people enter your life and everything begins to improve? Your faith grows. Your confidence increases. Your peace becomes stronger. Your purpose becomes clearer. But then there are others. People who seem friendly. People who seem supportive. People who say all the right things. Yet somehow after every conversation with them, you feel weaker. More confused. More discouraged. More exhausted. More doubtful. You cannot explain it. You cannot prove it. But you can feel it. The reason is simple. Not everyone who stands beside you is walking in the same direction as you. Some people are assigned to your growth. Others are attached to your distractions. And discerning the difference is one of the greatest forms of wisdom God can give. Think about this. When God wanted to protect Joseph, He gave him dreams. When God wanted to protect Noah, He gave him warnings. When God wanted to protect David, He gave him discernment. Because protection is not always about removing danger. Sometimes protection is about helping you recognize danger before it reaches you. Many people are praying for miracles while ignoring the wisdom that already sits in front of them. They pray for answers. Yet they ignore the uncomfortable feeling God keeps placing in their heart. They pray for guidance. Yet they continue walking toward people who repeatedly damage their peace. They pray for breakthroughs. Yet they refuse to release relationships that keep pulling them backward. Tonight, ask yourself one question. Who in your life consistently leaves you feeling smaller than you were before? Not challenged. Not corrected. Smaller. Because there is a difference. Healthy people help you grow. Toxic people help your fears grow. Healthy people encourage your future. Toxic people encourage your doubts. Healthy people celebrate your victories. Toxic people secretly compete with them. And that brings us to the shocking name. The name is not John. The name is not Michael. The name is not David. The name is not any specific person. The shocking name is this. The manipulator. That is the man you must beware of. The manipulator can appear anywhere. At work. Among friends. Within social circles. Even inside families. The manipulator rarely controls through force. He controls through confusion. He makes you question yourself. He makes you doubt your instincts. He makes you ignore what your spirit already knows. The manipulator wants access to your decisions because he understands something powerful. If he controls your choices, he controls your direction. And if he controls your direction, he influences your future. Watch carefully. Manipulators often follow a pattern. First, they flatter. Then they influence. Then they control. Then they criticize. Then they blame. Then they repeat the cycle. And many people spend years trapped in relationships they should have left long ago because they confuse attention with love. Not everyone who wants access to you deserves access to you. Not everyone who praises you values you. Not everyone who stays near you supports you. Some people stay close because your light benefits them. They enjoy the warmth of your purpose while secretly hoping you never realize your worth. This is why discernment matters. Discernment sees beyond appearances. Discernment notices patterns. Discernment recognizes what emotions often miss. God does not want his people living in constant suspicion. But neither does he want them living in constant blindness. There is a balance. A holy balance. A balance between love and wisdom. A balance between kindness and boundaries. A balance between forgiveness and discernment. Many people have mastered forgiveness. But they have never mastered boundaries. As a result, they keep reopening doors that God already closed. They keep returning to lessons they were meant to graduate from. They keep revisiting pain that was supposed to remain in the past. Listen carefully. Every season teaches something. Every challenge reveals something. Every relationship exposes something. Sometimes the greatest blessing is not the arrival of a new person. Sometimes the greatest blessing is the revelation of who someone really is. Because truth is a gift. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. A lie can comfort you temporarily. But truth can free you permanently. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack for years. Then suddenly someone removes it. You realize how exhausted you were only after the weight disappears. That is what happens when unhealthy influences leave your life. You discover how much energy they were taking from you. How much confidence they were draining. How much peace they were stealing. How much joy they were blocking. And suddenly you breathe differently. You think differently. You pray differently. You live differently. Because freedom feels different. The most dangerous people are not always the loudest. Sometimes they are the most subtle. They plant small doubts. Small fears. Small insecurities. Day after day. Week after week. Year after year. Until you begin living beneath your potential. But God never created you to live beneath your purpose. He created you to walk boldly. To think clearly. To love wisely. To move forward faithfully. The moment you stop giving unhealthy voices authority over your life, everything begins to change. Your confidence returns. Your clarity returns. Your peace returns. Your strength returns. And perhaps that is why you are hearing this message right now. Not because you should fear someone, but because you should value the wisdom God has already placed within you. That uncomfortable feeling. That hesitation. That repeated pattern you keep noticing. That quiet conviction in your spirit. Do not ignore it. Wisdom often whispers before consequences shout. The people who change your life are not always those who enter it. Sometimes they are the ones you finally stop allowing to control it. Remember that. The next chapter of your life may not begin with a new opportunity. It may begin with a new understanding. An understanding that your peace is valuable. Your purpose is valuable. Your future is valuable. And because those things are valuable, they deserve protection. Walk forward with wisdom. Walk forward with courage. Walk forward with discernment. And never forget this truth. God's protection is not always visible. Sometimes it arrives as clarity. Sometimes it arrives as conviction. Sometimes it arrives as the courage to finally see what was there all along. And when that moment comes, everything changes. Now listen carefully, because what comes next may be the most important part of this entire message. Many people think danger always announces itself. They believe that if someone intends to harm them, the signs will be obvious. But that is rarely how it happens. The greatest mistakes in life often begin with things that look harmless. A conversation. A suggestion. A friendship. A partnership. A voice that slowly gains influence. And before a person realizes it, they are making decisions they never would have made before. This is why spiritual discernment is so important. The enemy rarely begins by attacking your future. He begins by attacking your judgment. Because if your judgment becomes clouded, your future becomes vulnerable. Think about the moments in your life when you ignored your instincts. Think about the times when something felt wrong but you kept moving forward anyway. Most people can remember at least one situation where they sensed a warning but convinced themselves to ignore it. Later, when everything became clear, they looked back and realized the signs had been there all along. The warning was not missing. The warning was simply overlooked. And perhaps that is exactly what God wants to prevent in your life right now. There is a reason certain thoughts keep returning to your mind. There is a reason certain situations keep making you uncomfortable. There is a reason certain patterns keep appearing. Patterns reveal what words often hide. People can control their language. People can control their expressions. People can control their image. But maintaining a false pattern is much harder. Eventually, behavior tells the truth. Eventually, actions reveal intentions. Eventually, reality exposes what appearances tried to conceal. Watch for the person who only supports you when your success benefits them. Watch for the person who becomes uncomfortable whenever you begin growing. Watch for the person who celebrates your struggles more enthusiastically than your victories. Watch for the person who constantly introduces confusion into situations that should be simple. These signs matter. Not because they prove someone is evil, but because they reveal where a person's heart may truly be. Many people lose years of peace because they keep giving trust to individuals who have never earned it. Trust is valuable. Trust should not be handed out carelessly. It should be built through consistency. Built through honesty. Built through character. Built through time. Anyone can make promises. Character is revealed through actions. And actions always leave evidence. The truth is that some people do not want to see you fail completely. They simply want you to remain limited. They do not want you to become everything God created you to be. They are comfortable with a version of you that is smaller. A version that doubts itself. A version that seeks approval. A version that remains dependent on their opinions. Because once you fully recognize your value, their influence begins to disappear. And that is what frightens controlling people the most. A person who knows their worth becomes much harder to manipulate. A person who trusts God becomes much harder to deceive. A person who walks in wisdom becomes much harder to control. This is why growth often creates resistance. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are moving beyond limitations that once held you captive. Remember the story of David. Before he ever became king, there were people who underestimated him. People who dismissed him. People who failed to recognize what God saw. Yet God's plan was never dependent upon human approval. And neither is yours. Some of the people around you may never understand your purpose. They may never understand your calling. They may never understand your vision. That is okay. Their understanding is not required for your destiny. What matters is whether you continue listening to the wisdom God places within your heart. There are moments when God protects people through open doors. And there are moments when God protects people through closed doors. Sometimes the relationship ends because God sees something you cannot. Sometimes the opportunity disappears because God knows what lies ahead. Sometimes the delay itself is protection. Many people become frustrated when things do not happen according to their plans. Later they discover that what felt like rejection was actually protection. What felt like loss was actually guidance. What felt like disappointment was actually mercy. That perspective changes everything. Because suddenly you stop asking why certain people left. You stop asking why certain doors closed. You stop asking why certain plans failed. Instead, you begin asking what God was protecting you from. And that question often leads to remarkable answers. The longer you live, the more you realize that not every blessing arrives wrapped in excitement. Some blessings arrive disguised as interruptions. Some blessings arrive disguised as endings. Some blessings arrive disguised as warnings. That warning may be why you are hearing this message now. Not because a specific person should terrify you, but because wisdom is calling your attention towards something important. There is a difference between people who challenge you to grow and people who pressure you to compromise. Learn that difference. There is a difference between correction and manipulation. Learn that difference. There is a difference between guidance and control. Learn that difference. Those distinctions can save years of regret. One of the greatest gifts you can develop is the ability to observe without immediately reacting. Watch patterns. Watch consistency. Watch character. Truth has a way of revealing itself over time. You do not need to force it. You do not need to chase it. You do not need to fear it. Simply remain attentive. Because eventually masks become heavy. Eventually hidden motives become visible. Eventually reality speaks louder than appearances. And when that moment arrives, trust what you see. Trust the wisdom you have gained. Trust the lessons you have learned. Trust the growth that God has produced within you. Too many people remain trapped because they keep doubting themselves. They see the evidence. They recognize the pattern. They feel the warning. Yet they continue convincing themselves that nothing is wrong. Do not ignore what repeated experience is trying to teach you. A lesson repeated often enough becomes a message. And a message repeated often enough becomes guidance. The question is whether you are willing to listen. Because listening changes everything. Listening can protect your peace. Listening can protect your future. Listening can protect your purpose. And perhaps most importantly, listening can help you avoid becoming entangled in situations that were never meant for you. The next part of this message is even more important. Because there is one sign that reveals dangerous influence faster than almost anything else. Most people overlook it completely. Yet once you understand it, you will never see certain relationships the same way again. And what that sign reveals may explain experiences you have been struggling to understand for a very long time. Now pay very close attention. Because the sign we are about to discuss is one that countless people miss. It does not look dangerous. It does not sound dangerous. In fact, many people mistake it for normal behavior. Yet it quietly destroys confidence, weakens faith, and steals peace. The sign is this: constant discouragement. Not occasional concern. Not honest advice. Not loving correction. Constant discouragement. The kind that follows you everywhere. The kind that appears every time you talk about a dream. Every time you mention a goal. Every time you take a step forward. Every time you begin believing something better is possible. There is always a reason why it will not work. Always a reason why you should wait. Always a reason why you should doubt yourself. Always a reason why you should settle for less. At first it sounds reasonable. At first it sounds protective. At first it sounds wise. But over time a pattern begins to emerge. The pattern is not guidance. The pattern is limitation. And that is where many people get trapped. Because discouragement is powerful. Not because it changes reality. But because it changes perception. If a person hears negative messages long enough, they begin to expect failure. If they expect failure, they stop taking action. If they stop taking action, opportunities disappear. And when opportunities disappear, it looks as though the negative predictions were correct. But they were not correct. The discouragement itself created the outcome. This is why guarding your mind matters so much. Every great achievement begins as a thought. Every breakthrough begins as a belief. Every transformation begins as a possibility. Before anything changes around you, something changes within you. That is why negative influence is so dangerous. It attacks the place where possibilities are born. Think about how many people throughout history were told they could not succeed. How many were told their dreams were unrealistic? How many were told to stay where they were? How many were told to stop believing? Yet they continued anyway. And because they continued, everything changed. Imagine if they had listened to every voice that doubted them. Imagine if they had surrendered every time someone questioned their future. Imagine if they had accepted every limitation others tried to place upon them. Their stories would have ended before they ever began. The same is true for you. There are things inside you that have not fully emerged yet. There are abilities you have not fully discovered. There are opportunities you have not yet seen. There are chapters of your life that have not yet been written. Do not allow temporary voices to define a permanent future. One of the greatest mistakes people make is allowing someone else's fear to become their own. Fear spreads quickly. Doubt spreads quickly. Negativity spreads quickly. But so does faith. So does hope. So does courage. So does wisdom. Choose carefully which voices receive your attention. Because attention is valuable. Whatever consistently receives your attention eventually influences your thinking. And whatever consistently influences your thinking eventually influences your life. That is why some people feel stuck. Not because they lack ability. Not because they lack potential. Not because they lack opportunity. But because they have spent years listening to voices that convince them they are incapable. The tragedy is that many of those voices were wrong from the beginning. Yet the damage occurred because they were believed. Today, consider this carefully. Who benefits when you doubt yourself? Who benefits when you remain afraid? Who benefits when you never pursue your purpose? Certainly not you. And certainly not the people whose lives you may one day impact. The world has enough fear. The world has enough negativity. The world has enough discouragement. What it needs are people who continue moving forward despite uncertainty. People who continue believing despite obstacles. People who continue growing despite resistance. Perhaps that is exactly why this message found you. Not to make you suspicious of everyone. Not to make you fearful. Not to make you anxious. But to remind you that wisdom and discernment matter. You cannot control every person who enters your life. But you can control who influences your decisions. You cannot control every opinion spoken about you. But you can control which opinions you accept. You cannot control every challenge that appears. But you can control your response. And that response shapes your future. There is something remarkable that happens when a person finally recognizes unhealthy influence. Their confidence begins returning. Their peace begins returning. Their clarity begins returning. The weight starts lifting. The confusion starts fading. The future starts looking brighter. Not because circumstances changed overnight. But because the source of unnecessary pressure lost its power. Many people spend years trying to change others. Trying to convince them. Trying to earn approval. Trying to gain acceptance. Only to discover that freedom begins when they stop seeking validation from the wrong places. You do not need every person to understand you. You do not need every person to support you. You do not need every person to agree with you. You simply need the wisdom to recognize who truly belongs in your circle and who does not. That wisdom is priceless. It protects your energy. It protects your purpose. It protects your peace. And peace is one of the most valuable gifts you will ever possess. Do not trade it carelessly. Do not surrender it easily. Do not allow it to be stolen by voices that were never qualified to direct your life. The future ahead of you is too important. The opportunities ahead of you are too important. The purpose within you is too important. Guard them wisely. Because every great journey eventually reaches a moment of decision. A moment when a person must choose between fear and faith. Between confusion and clarity. Between limitation and growth. Between unhealthy influence and godly wisdom. That moment may be closer than you think. And when it arrives, remember this. God often protects people long before they realize they need protection. He sends wisdom before disaster. He sends clarity before confusion takes over. He sends discernment before deception gains influence. And sometimes he sends a message like this one. A message reminding you to pay attention. A message reminding you to trust wisdom. A message reminding you that your future is worth protecting. The warning was never about living in fear. The warning was about living with discernment. And discernment is one of the greatest gifts you can carry into the next chapter of your life. So move forward with confidence. Move forward with wisdom. Move forward with faith. And remember, not every voice deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves your trust. Not every influence deserves access to your future. Protect your peace. Protect your purpose. Protect your faith. Because the life ahead of you is too valuable to place in the hands of the wrong person. And that may be the most important lesson of all.